Hi YouTubers, this is another video from your friendly neighborhood reviewer, Evelyn. Today we're going to be reviewing finally the film The Batman 2022. So, what can we say about The Batman? We have a new incarnation of The Batman played by Robert Pattinson and also Catwoman played by Zoe Kravitz, and then we get the Penguin. This movie apparently was inspired by The Batman The Long Halloween comic. Haven't read it myself personally, seen some images, and we get this time a different criminal, not the Joker, not the League of Shadows, this time the Riddler. Some of you may have seen the film Batman Forever, which Jim Carrey starred as the Riddler, but from what we could see in the image in the comic books, for me personally, the Riddler was never somebody I took seriously. It was more a caricature of a clown maybe? But the Riddler here is presented in a more terrifying form, and this Batman film is rated at 15, and for what I can see, they cleverly blurred out a lot of the murder scenes, and we have a before and after shot. So the Batman movie is a tale of 3 acts. The first act, we get introduced to the serial killer, the Riddler, who reminds me of a cross between the Zodiac Killer and Jigsaw, as he violently hammers the head of the mayor of Gotham. And from that scene we see that the movie doesn't clearly show the mayor's head being bludgeoned. Instead, we get a before and after shot. Through the response of the Gotham police, we get introduced to the Batman as the bat signal is clearly seen shown throughout the sky. And then we get a voiceover from Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne talking about the crime within the city, and we understand that he hasn't been Batman for quite so long, as seen in the movie, for 2 years, and he describes that he uses himself as a fear for all the criminals, burglars, murderers. So as the Batman is going to the crime scene, he goes and stops a group of hooligans, crime people. I think with the face paint that they had on, probably this group was maybe connected to the Joker, and we get quite a brutal fight scene with Batman against the gang. But the most prominent thing, when Batman arrives to the crime scene, we see him working with Detective Jim Gordon. He's not commissioner yet. And this is very different from all the other Batman films, as we haven't really seen Batman working so close together with the police, like the interaction. Of course, in the film, Batman doesn't really speak to the police, mainly to Jim. And then what affects Batman so much, as the mayor's son had found the body, and of course, we get put together back with the origins of Bruce Wayne, of how he also tragically saw his parents get murdered after a supposed mugging, and that left Bruce Wayne scarred immensely. And from the first crime scene, we see that the Riddler likes to leave behind calling cards. He leaves behind ciphers for the Batman, and we can see Bruce Wayne's intelligence here, where he's able to solve the ciphers really quickly. And then through the second act of the movie, we see that what stage Bruce Wayne is in terms of being the Batman. We see him writing in his journals, clearly stating he's been Batman for 2 years. And what we can gather that Bruce Wayne hasn't created the persona of rich billionaire yet. He doesn't really care about his parents' company, to be frank. And we see the Bruce Wayne being still psychologically scarred, trying to come to terms with what happened to his parents, or with lack of, and that he's been like a vigilante in a sense, and with no direction or no purpose. And also Bruce Wayne, Robert Pattinson plays a more subdued, reserved, more reserved Bruce Wayne, is like he's holding in all this anger that he carries. But very reminiscent in my eyes with the Val Kilmer version of Batman Forever. You can draw the similarities there. And also we get introduced to Alfred. In this case, we see a more, not an old Alfred, but more of a bit more vibrant Alfred. Like, he's not too old. And we kind of get inferred that Alfred was ex-army, was there to hire to protect Bruce's parents. But after when Bruce's parents died, Alfred took over his guardianship as best he could. While the Batman is investigating the mayor's death, he goes and traces from the photos that was found on the crime scene that the mayor was going to a shady club, coming out with a girl in the photo. So he traces back to the club, and then we get introduced to the Penguin, played by Colin Farrell, which I have to say, the prosthetics was incredible. You could have not recognized Colin Farrell whatsoever, and that to me personally was a standout performance, however short his screen time was. And while Bruce Wayne goes into the club dressed as the Batman and knocking out the bouncers. For this purpose, I'm going to refer to Bruce Wayne as the Batman, since 90% of the film, he is the Batman. So as the Batman is interrogating the Penguin about the girl, we get introduced to Selina Kyle, as we see her there working in the club where the Penguin is. And while the Batman looks again at the photo, he sees the boots that match Selina Kyle's, so he goes and follows Selina Kyle to her apartment, and that's when he sees the other girl there. And then after that, when he sees Selina Kyle moving out, putting on her cat suit and the funny little balaclava, which has two little pointy ears, almost like a kitten, he finds her breaking back into the mayor's house, into her safe, and as they have an interaction there, he finds out that she's taking back her friend's passport, the mysterious friend from the photo, her name Annika. And then there's a bit of a scuffle, and when they get back to the apartment, we found that Annika had disappeared, that they had taken her. Bruce inadvertently gets Selina to work with him, where we find out that Bruce has this technology of contact lenses, which is kind of like a camera per se. But things go sideways when Selina is helping, because we see the introduction of the crime boss, Carmine Falcone, which is notorious in Bruce's origin story that he could have been connected with Bruce's parents' death. So they get separated because Selina's had enough trying to work with Bruce. The murders carry on. We have the second murder of the district attorney, because as Selina was there spying for Bruce, we see that there's a club within the club where all the mayors, the police and everything. So within the second act, we establish that there is a wide conspiracy of corruption, which Bruce is uncovering through the means of the Riddler. And then we talk about the Riddler. As I mentioned, he's a cross between the Zodiac Killer and Jigsaw. Apparently that's what the actor Paul Dano, I think, was inspired by that clearly. Clearly deranged killer with a clever mind, leading Bruce to find out the truth about the widespread corruption within the city. That with the homeless, the poor, because as Bruce uncovers each clue and puzzle, he ends up finding more and more about the corruption within Gotham City. By the second murder, we get that the district attorney was kidnapped and it was placed with a bomb around his neck into the church as they were all holding the funeral for the mayor. While Bruce Wayne goes to the mayor's funeral as Bruce Wayne, we get kind of like a human interaction between Alfred and Bruce. Well, Alfred's trying to give Bruce his cufflinks, and then he's he doesn't want to, and then he says, do you think you're a Wayne? And then Alfred's your father gave these to me. So we see that Bruce, at some level, maybe he's trying to keep himself at an arm distance from Alfred, because he couldn't, to me personally, he couldn't probably bear the idea of losing him. So to keep himself safe, he remains a distance. So while Bruce goes to the funeral as Bruce Wayne, a car crashes in with the mayor, and Bruce, typical Batman fashion, disappears and puts on his costume, which apparently he carries his costume everywhere. And when he gets there, he's trying to help with the hostage situation, as the district attorney has a mobile phone or cell phone duct taped to his hand, and once he answers, the Riddler is there on the other side through webcam. Well, not webcam, through FaceTime. It's very interesting to see modern means of technology used with the Batman. And while they're figuring out the riddles, unfortunately the bomb goes off anyway, but we understand that the corruption goes really big, because apparently in Gotham, 16 years before, they took that of the main crime boss, Salvatore Maroni, and apparently the whole police took him down, and Carmine Falcone took over, in some way took over the operations under the table. So when the bomb goes off, Batman gets the brunt of the explosion. That left me shocked. I was like, oh my god. In this Batman film, we can see more of the realistic side about being Batman. And when he wakes up, Batman finds himself in the middle of the police station, and that left me shocked as well. The film addresses the real life consequences of going around in a vigilante suit. By all God's grace, Jim Gordon was there. They have a really great relationship within the movie is between Jim Gordon and Batman. Jim understands that the police, the city is in chaos, and he has no other person to lean on but the Batman. So Jim Gordon's there because once he starts to, they're trying to check his eye pupils, and then once the idea comes across one of the policemen, like to take off his mask, that's when Batman wakes up and he's there, like literally, fighting with the police, and you're thinking, Jesus Christ, this is getting, a real life situation. In real life, if you think about this, in real life, a man going around dressed in a bat suit, get arrested. You think he's crazy, no matter if he is a billionaire. So things are really tense in the police scene. So Jim manages to convince all the other police officers that he can get the Batman to cooperate. So they're in a small room, and Jim basically telling Batman, punch me real hard, take the keys and run up to the top of the roof. Batman knows the position he's putting Jim in, so he's like, are you sure? This could put you in a lot of heat. But Jim's like, no, don't worry, just do it. He does that, and there's a great escape scene where Batman is running for his life. This is the time where, this is actually great about this movie. Since we see Batman in his early years, we can see the more natural fear reactions of a person being chased, and he gets to the top of the police station, and we get an epic scene that is a bit more realistic, where we have one of those spacesuits, kind of like the screw, like space jumping basically. He puts up his suit, but before he goes off the top of the building, we can see Batman's natural fear reaction. It's like, oh my god, and then he does that and he ends up gliding through Gotham. It was a great scene, but as he gets under the bridge and pulls off his parachute, he gets injured quite a bit, end up being banged up, and I was thinking, oh crap. So by the end of the third act, we see that the Riddler goes and exposes the truth behind Bruce Wayne's parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne. This is another part of the movie where they've taken things really differently about Bruce Wayne's parents. A lot of times when children have their parents die prematurely, they don't really know the dark side about their parents. The only thing they have with them is just, as a child, your parents are your everything. There's nothing wrong with them. They know everything. So when he uncovers that his mom, Martha, not uncovers, I assume we already know, but for the audience, we never question who was Martha before she married to, Thomas Wayne. So they talk about Martha came from the founding family of Arkham. So which is, to me, was a shock, because as only people that know about Batman know about Arkham Asylum, that holds the most notorious Batman villains. And when she married, Thomas, but then apparently Martha had mental health issues, could be family related things coming in and out. And apparently Bruce's father, Thomas, went and talked to Carmine Falcone about scaring the reporter. Carmine Falcone goes and tells Bruce a different story. Now, when Bruce finds this out on the news, we get a very reminiscent scene where Batman Begins, for all those who have seen the movie, where at the end of the trial with Christian Bale's Batman, he goes and visits Carmine Falcone saying that what you did was not justice, I'm going to confront you and all of that. So those two scenes are very similar. Well, not very similar, but they're quite similar. So Carmine goes and paints, Bruce one story that his father did come to him about, roughing up the news reporter, do what you need to do, even if you mean to kill him. And Bruce is very shocked at this news, at the idea of his father being in such a situation. But then again, there was a scene before that the Riddler was after Bruce Wayne. Throughout the film, we understand the Riddler hasn't put together that Bruce Wayne is Batman, but we can understand maybe not. And the Riddler goes and sends Bruce a package, in which unfortunately Alfred opens and he gets blown up. When I saw that, I was thinking, oh my god, I'm so shocked. I was like, but thank god Alfred doesn't die, because Alfred, if you kill off Alfred, it's the end of Bruce Wayne's humanity there. And we see the very heartfelt scene when Bruce Wayne comes back after seeing that Alfred is fine and waiting for Alfred to wake up. Bruce goes and confronts Alfred and saying, "Is this true?" And like Alfred's like, "Yes, it is true, but not the way you think it is. Once your dad found out that what Carmine Falcone did, he said he was going to come clean." And Alfred puts in a conspiracy or a hypothesis that on the same day which Thomas was going to expose everything, confess, both Bruce's mom and dad died on the same day. But despite how much Bruce wants to get confirmation on the facts, even Alfred can't, say it's for sure, it's for real. Then we get a touching scene where Bruce realizes, after when Alfred explains that how guilty he felt that he couldn't protect his parents, and he was left with a young boy with he didn't know much to do. And then we get hark back to early comic book stories. From what I can remember, that Alfred told Bruce how to fight, and then we get the inference that Alfred is probably SAS, British Armed Forces. And when Alfred gives that confession about how guilty he felt about not protecting his parents and doing a bad job as a father, Bruce opens up his feelings, that little inch of feelings, and tells Alfred that he's not afraid to die, but the fear that he never wanted to experience again was the idea of losing somebody close. And that's the part when Alfred Bruce extends his hand to Bruce, and they make up in that point, is that point where they come to an understanding. And by the third act, after when Bruce goes and saves Selina from trying to kill Carmine Falcone, as she ends up finding out that Carmine Falcone went and killed her friend. There's a big confrontation where Batman goes back to the underground, goes back to the club. There's a great fight scene with a scuffle, and then Selina goes and reveals to Carmine that "You're my dad," which of course didn't matter either way. We find out that Carmine went and strangled Selina's mother. The Batman convinces Selina not to go over that edge, and we see Batman's moral beliefs about not using guns. So Selina goes and says, "Okay, that's fine." And as Carmine comes out with the police force there and everything, but before that we find out the greater conspiracy is that the big fund that Bruce's parents have behind, that was for the city every year, was taken over by everybody, and that Carmine went and took over that and had basically all the police force in his pocket, and that's what the Riddler was trying to expose, that part of the renewal fund. But as Carmine comes out, he gets assassinated by the Riddler, and they end up all finding him. For what we can say within the movie, the Riddler did aim his goal of destroying Gotham in a sense. He wanted complete annihilation, but that wasn't the case, because we find out that the Riddler had about 500 followers that was all twisted in the mind. They were going to assassinate everybody. So bombs get exploded in Gotham, and the water ends up rushing in, so it's basically a big huge flood. And the new mayor-elect, a female mayor, gets elected, but that same night they just tried to kill her. Water's coming in, basically all of Gotham gets flooded, and we see the end of a city potentially. And by the end of it, Batman's there fighting against the Riddler's followers, and we see in Batman the desperation there of trying to save the city. And also Batman inspires Selina to go and help him, and also Jim. And the mayor gets shot in the shoulder. I was thinking, oh god, was she trying to calm down the crowd? From what I gather, Jim Gordon went and pulled the mayor to safety. I guarantee to you in Batman 2 he'll be Commissioner Gordon this time, because he went and saved the mayor. There are some parts that I haven't really emphasized for the sake of it'll be a very long analysis of the movie. But from what we gathered, the Riddler was vengeful because he was an orphan, and he didn't know Batman was Bruce Wayne. When they had that epic interrogation scene when the Riddler was talking already in Arkham with the Batman, we can kind of see that Bruce Wayne thinks the Riddler knows he's Batman. But from the end of the conversation we gathered, he didn't put two and two together that Bruce Wayne was Batman. So we get a sigh of relief there that his identity wasn't going to be uncovered, because there was a slight hint that probably the Riddler knew, which wasn't the fact. So Batman saves everybody, essentially. Well, not essentially, he's the main thing to save everybody. The ending of the film, it was very different. We see Batman becoming a beacon of light. When the flood came into the stadium and it was going to be all electrocuted, Batman jumps into that long piece of electrical wire, cuts it, and then I was thinking to myself, did they just kill off the Batman? But he manages to swim to the surface, and he lights up a flare, and we can see that moment that Batman becomes a beacon of light, helping people to escape. That he's not just a vigilante or a person seeking for vengeance. And then he finds his new direction of hope, helping the army, helping the police, saving people. We don't really see what happens after. Actually, we do. We see what happens after. But then again, there's a cutscene within the movie, which I find to be a cutscene, where the Riddler is there going crazy that the Batman helped everybody, and then we see somebody from the next jail cell talking to him, from which we can see within the shadows a big howling laugh goes out. What we can gather, we get the introduction of the Joker, so which could be for Batman 2. I don't know how they give me the Joker, but to me at first when I was in the cinema and I saw it, he looked like he was Two-Face, because his face, kind of half his face looked burnt. But at what point of the Joker's origin it is, we don't know. We don't know whether the Batman already put Joker in the prison, or whether the Joker has started off in Arkham. That's to see for Batman 2. So the real ending of the film, we see Selina in the cemetery. They're talking, like saying her goodbyes because she's going to tell mom, because she's going to go off to the city. And then Batman's there, like telling Selina, where are you going? And then we get this really tense, like Selina likes the Batman. Selina did kiss the Batman before, and she kissed it the second time. But we cannot second time while saving him. But we can kind of get the sense that Bruce has that yearning for Selina, her carefree attitude. Like, he wants to, but then again, he has responsibilities. He can't just go off with Selina, despite her offering him to come with her to Bloodhaven, which is, for all you DC fans, apparently another city which resides with Nightwing, aka Dick Grayson. Who knows, maybe in Batman 2 we can get Bruce traveling to Bloodhaven and meeting Dick Grayson, God knows. But Selina realizes that Batman is committed to Gotham, and then they both part their separate ways. Well, anyway, YouTubers, this is I've prepared this video as best as I can, try to make it cohesive from start to finish. My takeaway from this film is the most realistic take of the Batman I've seen so far, and a different retelling of the story. Parents die, shoot dead, he's already Bruce Wayne and already Batman. Batman Begins, we tried to get more of a sense of Batman's beginnings, but with this one, we have a retelling of his origin stories and where he is. What did I think about Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne? Aesthetically, he looks like Bruce Wayne. But one thing I am excited for Batman 2 is to see him create his Bruce Wayne persona, because he can't forever stay, ignorant of his parents' company. There's another part they didn't explore in the film, because it's already a long film as it is, almost 3 hours, about who's running Wayne Enterprises. Because if not, by the end of it, Bruce Wayne will be poor by the end of it. But we can kind of assume that Alfred is like they're managing all those business-like things. So what can I say about the Batman? A great movie. I would recommend everybody to see it. This movie is perfect for people that haven't seen the comic books, but then again, it might annoy other people that find comic books or the notion of a man in a bat suit to be maybe just too boring. Anyway, YouTubers, this is the end of the video, and thanks for listening.